Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Midwestern Marks live stream, the Liger-Garrido Power Hour, the Grappler and the Philosopher. Many names for this show, but it's going to be a great stream tonight. We're going to be talking about, obviously, what's going on in Palestine, the Israeli occupation. We'll be watching a series of videos related to that. Ilhan Omar recently asked Congress to condemn the deaths of Palestinians in Gaza. So we'll talk about that. There was also a lot of debate as Republicans were trying to censor the only Palestinian in the American Congress, Rashida Tlaib, and there were some impassioned speeches made in her defense. We'll also talk about different trade union movements that have been rising up and showing solidarity with Palestine recently, which is fantastic to see. And we'll also cover what Russia's position is on Palestine and how the current events in Gaza and with the Israeli occupation fit into the broader geopolitical situation and the rise of multipolarity and the fall of the unipolar American empire. So it should be an interesting show, mostly revolving around Israel-Palestine, and we'll get right into it after our intro. Well, I want to start this stream with something that I start most streams with and asking, what are you reading right now, Carlos? And I know that's a dangerous question to ask a philosopher, so if you can keep it under 3 minutes, tell us about what you're reading right now and what you're drawing from it.
As usual, a whole host of different things. I downloaded the Speechify app, and what I've been doing is just getting a bunch of random 1930s CPUSA documents and reading them, especially the stuff concerning some of the initial settlements that were done on Palestinian territory. And I think I mentioned it last stream that people like Earl Browder were already drawing connections of Zionism to fascism. And I've been going back and reading the New English translation of Losordo's Stalin, History of a Black Legend. I think we're reading together now.
Yeah,
I had read it in Spanish.
I'm taking a little break from that, but it's great.
Yeah, it's a fantastic text, and along with the other scholarship that folks like Grover Furr have done, which I know some people on the left are not the biggest Furr fans, but he does publish in respectable journals. He had an article from a couple years ago in the Journal of Labor and Society that dealt with the question of the purges and the actual conspiracies and coup attempts and terrorists, the role that terrorism played in those coup attempts. So the people that were killed, were actively trying to overthrow the Soviet state. And we're using terrorism to achieve their ends. And that's something that's confirmed also in Losordo's text. So I've been reading that, and I'm kind of shifting into a new research project. I had, 2 to 3 weeks of just working on presentations for Mexico, doing them in Mexico, and then, being sick for a week. So I'm kind of in a transitional phase now, but my next big project is on the origins of philosophy in Melitas. and I've been reading a series of different texts by specialists on the subject, and I'm going to provide the materialist thesis that philosophy is really a product of these social, economic, and political transformations that undergo society in Miletus, and specifically the origin of coinage, which is huge because that's what Marx will describe later on as a real abstraction. And on the basis of that real abstraction, you have the conditions for the sort of abstraction that you do in philosophy. So that's my next major research project that I'm also uh, doing some reading for now.
Nice. And I think you almost made the 3-minute cutoff there. So good job. I'm reading History is Mystery. I'm freaking plowing through it. I just read Parentes Inventing Reality. Yeah, it's so good. Such an easy read. It's like one of those books where I have to set it down to go to wrestling practice every day. And I'm like, damn it, I just want to keep reading because there's so much. It's so interesting. And I love Parentes' writing style so much. I'm doing the Parenti deep dive right now. I just finished Inventing Reality and then Make Believe Media, the politics of entertainment, which is about entertainment media and how that brainwashes us or puts ideas in our heads about countries like the DPRK and revolution. And one of the best things that he calls out in that book and in Inventing Reality, which is something that I think Chomsky misses in Manufacturing Consent because he's an anarchist, is this omnipresent omnipresent theme in all American media that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Never seek power. Nothing good can come out of power. Nothing good has ever come from the working class seizing state power, because you just become corrupted and you become just as bad as the last autocrats that you overthrew. It's an ahistoric argument. There have been huge, or giant leaps in social progress due to revolutions and due to revolutions from the bottom up, whether by the peasantry or by the working masses or by masses of slaves. So Parenti talks about that and debunks that myth and talks about how that theme is present in American media and especially entertainment media, which I really liked. And now I'm going on to History is Mystery, which is really giving a harsh criticism of the church and the influence of Christianity on Western society, which is, for me, as someone who grew up in an evangelical Christian family, and I still have all these, relatives who are really close to me who are Christian. I'm always trying to see the good in it, right? I'm always trying to see the radical side of Jesus Christ and, the feed the poor and feed the hungry. But man, Parenti makes that hard, and History is Mystery. He really, really turns you against the church, talks about how, the church really became a tool of class society, that justified slavery, justified oppression, and really helped reinforce and bring about this strict patriarchal male-dominated society. So that's History is Mystery. It's really great so far. I'm going to write a review when I'm done. And then after I finish History is Mystery, I'm picking up Image and Reality of the Israel-Palestine Conflict by Norman Finkelstein, which another reason I want to get through History is Mystery is so I can hammer that. Hopefully I'll have a lot of time to read. I'm going to LA tomorrow, leaving tomorrow night. Shout out to everybody who donated and helped us fund that trip. Gonna go spread socialist theory with the masses on a big platform that I can't talk about yet, but it'll be exciting when that's released. So
Yeah, man. Well, like you, one of the first people that I was told to read as I was making the transition into Marxism Leninism was Parenti. But I wasn't told like which book to go to first, so I just went to our Laura's library and I checked the Parenti section. I took out History is Mystery, and that was the first one I ever read. And it's not your usual Parenti because it's so extremely broad in the historical periods that he's covering. But it was a tremendous text that helped you make the connections of how it is that like class society always has certain elements of it, specifically of the deception that's necessary and control that's necessary, that ends up taking different forms and different modes of life or modes of production, but that are a common feature of societies that are structured on the basis of class antagonisms. And those early chapters on the church and the amount of book burning and document burning that was done. Oh, it was. I was bringing it out in the student essays that I was doing, and my counselor, who was an Anglican socialist somehow, but he wasn't very appreciative of it. But yeah, Parenti's, anything you read from Parenti is superb.
For sure, for sure. I want to answer one of these questions here. It said, before we jump into our content for today, I don't mean to antagonize, but why are you so focused on the Israel-Palestine conflict? Well, because it's extremely important, because there's an ongoing genocide and an ethnic cleansing that is heating up right now. I mean, it's important to note that prior to this current war starting, Israel was already killing one Palestinian child per day, multiple civilians per day and one child per day. And this is something that we followed very closely. So it's day after day watching people die in the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank at the hands of Israeli forces, watching them kill journalists and things like that. So it's a horrible human rights situation. So, it's just on that human level, you see these babies being killed and these civilians being slaughtered, and you're against it. But we are also Marxist-Leninists, which means we believe that capitalism has reached its stage of imperialism. It's reached a stage where finance capital, meaning giant banks and giant industrial capitalists, have merged together into these big conglomerates. And they control the government and use the government and the military to try and expand their capital and super exploit countries overseas. Israel is really an arm of Western imperialism. I mean, this is why Joe Biden famously said, if there wasn't an Israel in the Middle East, we would have to invent one, because the U.S. wants to maintain this neo-colonial outpost in the Middle East to protect their economic and their political interests. So us as socialists, us as Marxists, we see the abomination that is the ethno-state of Israel, the apartheid state of Israel, the Israeli apartheid and occupation as an outgrowth of capitalism and capitalist imperialism. And the only way to combat this is socialism, is struggle from the bottom up. Which is what we're seeing right now in Palestine, is struggle for self-determination by the Palestinians, who are being ethnically cleansed, against the Israeli apartheid state being armed to the teeth by the U.S. empire. There's also major geopolitical implications that we're going to talk about later in the stream, but it's becoming the most important issue in the world right now, which for a long time has been Ukraine. That's been the site of conflict between the rising multipolar world and the U.S. empire, U.S. hegemony. And now I think that's shifting to really to Israel. That's the most important thing going on in the world right now. So maybe Carlos will give a little bit of a different answer than me. But
Well, it's a genocide, and it's before that it was an apartheid state with genocidal dimensions at the macro level, but it's intensified to the point that you said, before there was one child dying a day, now there's one dying every 15 minutes. So it's if it's I understand where this person is coming from, but it's, for me at least, it becomes very clear when I engage with other things going on in politics and in class struggles that, like, yes, my heart hurt is there, and I see the importance of it, but the whole time I'm thinking, there's a fucking genocide going on. Like, I want all it's part of the reason why I wasn't able to work much on the period going into my trip to Mexico. I could have probably finished the lectures that I did quick. I couldn't work because my mind was the whole time in what was going on. And, you scroll through Twitter and you see these horrific videos of people being slaughtered, kids being bombed and dismembered, and the weight of importance for this genocide is, I think, large enough to be qualitatively different from everything else going on in politics. both at the national and international level. That's why it needs to be the forefront, I think, of everything we do. And yes, we can talk about other things. And today we're planning on talking about other things. We have a few non-Palestine related segments, but the vast majority of them are focused on what's going on around this issue. How are our leaders treating it? How are they treating the people that are protesting against genocide here in the U.S. and all the different dimensions of this ongoing genocidal war against the people of Gaza?
Absolutely. Thank you for the super chat, Zero Cult Leader. Appreciate that. All of our funding at the Institute comes from you, the people, by the people, for the people, through super chats, through patreon.com/MidwesternMarks, direct donations to our PayPal. You can find all that in our link tree. But you see Jackson Hinkle on the Alex Jones show? I did not. I also haven't seen Haz Aldin of Infrared on the Tim Pool show, but I'm looking forward to checking out those at some point. I saw some clip of Alex Jones asking Jackson about Joseph Stalin, and it just made me laugh. Like, it's just such a surreal thing. But I have not seen it yet. Assuming Carlos has seen it.
Sorry, I was muted.
Right.
I was able to see it.
Oh, nice.
It was I saw most of it last night. Don't click the link I sent. I saw most of it last night, and yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. Obviously, Jackson doesn't approach the question of communism in the ways we do. And there's, of course, many things that we disagree with him on, both in terms of form and in terms of some substantive stuff. But he's talking to a base of people that most of which are probably working class, and part of the working class that if you would imagine like counter-revolutionary forces being pulled from the mass of people, you would probably think it's that part. So he's talking to a large audience of people that have been conditioned to be very anti-communist, and he's making an argument for communism in a way that avoids the sort of buzzwords that they have been taught to just jerk at whenever they hear them.
It's also people who are conspiracy theorists, right? So they're already skeptical of the government. Like,
Right.
you know, if you're a communist and you look into the stuff Alex Jones is saying, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's wrong, and then there's, you know, things that are
Yeah.
right, like his
Right.
criticism of the war in Iraq.
Yeah, it's an issue. I'm gonna be honest. It was enjoyable to watch because it was funny. It was very funny at some moments, but I see it in general as a positive development. I might be wrong. I think it's a complex issue. There's a lot of contradictions at play, but whenever you're going in front of millions of people and making an argument for communism, distorted, however you might think the person's understanding of communism is, I think it's positive in the context of a country that even the word communism is used as a synonym for evil and something that the people should reject. So
Yeah.
I support it, I guess. I think it's a positive thing.
Have us on your show, Alex Jones.
That would be a difficult conversation to have.
I would. I'd do it though. All right, should we jump into our first video for today? We have a 90-year-old Jewish lady talking about why she's an anti-Zionist.
Yeah, that's a great clip.
You want me to pull it up or you got it?
Oh, yeah, I could.
I can do it too.
I can't be a Zionist. No way. It's such an injustice, such cruelty, such extortion. I mean, you know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, a lot of Israelis were not so ardent Zionists. That they've become more ardent. I was brainwashed as a youngster. I was a Zionist. I was proud of Israel. I had to, educate myself. Someone suggested I read a book. I don't remember now what it was, but it told about Shaba and Shatila, and and other things about what was happening. And I realized, I can't be a Zionist. No way. It's such an injustice, such cruelty, such distortion. I mean, the Holocaust was real, and anti-Semitism is real, but it doesn't give the Jews the right to then be the oppressor. It breaks my heart.
And there's a lot of people who originally were Zionists. I believe even Albert Einstein. And then he
Yeah.
later changed his mind when he learned about the crimes of the Israeli apartheid state. Stalin followed a similar path because it sounds, like, Jewish people should be allowed to have a state because of, all the anti-Semitism that's been perpetrated throughout history and the Holocaust. And, it sounds like a good idea. And then you realize in practice it's an ethno-state that is dependent on expelling Palestinian Arabs from their homeland in order to take that land, and depriving them of their political rights by having an apartheid state that only Jewish settlers are allowed to participate in. And the vanguard of the Zionist forces and settler colonialism has always been the extreme right. It's always been the extreme right Zionists who have been the ones going in with the guns and clearing out the entire Palestinian villages, groups like the Irgun and others. So once you get past what Zionism says it is, and you get down to the root, the core of what it actually is and what it's morphed into, which is just, blatant fascism. Israel's, I don't know what else you could describe it besides a fascist state committing an ethnic cleansing. Once you see that, it's impossible to be in favor of it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's I forgot what I was going to say, but it's premised on a um, it's it's very much rooted in this notion that I remember what I was going to say. It was going to be a reference to Kwame Ture. You can't have a movement of the oppressed that sides is funded and it's propelled by imperialism. Like once you're so deeply rooted in American imperialism and the imperialist system in general, you lose the status of that movement being a movement of the oppressed. And if it ever had a bottom up character, which I don't think it ever will, I never did in the research that I've been able to do. It's very clear to see that this is the bulwark of imperialist reaction in this region of the world. And it's very sad to see that the Jewish people that have been oppressed for millenniums, a lot of them have fell for the Zionist bullshit, but a lot of them haven't. Some of the most militant struggles against this ongoing intensification of the extermination of the people of Gaza have been led by Jewish organizations. And, some of the clips that we have ready to watch today are clips of Jewish organizations uh, fighting against and doing these great protests against the ongoing Israeli genocide.
Did you know that I just learned this recently, that Israel has free healthcare and Israeli citizens have free government funded healthcare too? So the US is giving them $3.8 billion a year plus. Biden's now trying to do another $14 billion weapons package to Israel. And we're also paying for their citizens to have government healthcare when we can't even get that here in the United States. And then you wonder why there's an increase in Zionists going over to Israel from the U.S. And Jewish people taking their so-called birthright and going and settling in Israel. In a lot of cases, they have better conditions here or there than we do in the U.S. because our government is willing to dump as much money as it needs into Israel to maintain a neo-colonial outpost in West Asia. But they won't do anything for the citizens here at home. They won't even give us the same kind of health care that the rest of the developed world has. So Yeah, it's just a horrific situation. It couldn't be more obvious what's going on. It couldn't be more obvious what Israel is to the U.S. I mean, they're constantly launching missiles at our enemies, at Hezbollah in Lebanon, launching missiles at the Assad government in Syria, launching missiles at Iran. These are all countries who are enemies of the United States. Countries deemed terrorist states or the axis of evil or whatever name the U.S. gives to their enemies to try and paint them as comic book villains. Those are the countries that Israel is constantly fighting in the Middle East. It was Israel who helped back ISIS and other jihadist terrorist groups in Syria when the U.S. was trying to overthrow the Assad government, which is ironic considering Israel is now trying to paint Hamas as being the same as ISIS, when in reality, the only party in this conflict who found themselves on the same side as ISIS is the U.S. and Israel. But yeah.
No, absolutely. And I wanted to share one of the videos that that we have pulled up of Jewish comrades from If Not Now, the If Not Now peace organization. Actually, it's the Not in Our Name. Sorry, If Not Now is another organization, but the Not in Our Name Jewish organization, which has been doing some very cool things to protest against the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. I also wanted to say what's up to our comrade, our brother in arms, Addison Ronson,
Eddie.
who he started our activist careers with. What's up, brother? I hope you're doing well. Loving the goatee and the hair. But yeah, let's watch a little bit of this, and Eddie, you let me know when you think it's right to take it off.
You bet. I can't hear anything. Oh, you got your videos muted.
On Friday, the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly voted in support of a humanitarian truce, but Israel and the United States voted against the resolution. Massive demonstrations calling for a ceasefire in Gaza continued this weekend, including here in New York City. On Friday night, thousands of members of Jewish Voice for Peace New York City and their allies shut down the main terminal of Grand Central Station during rush hour. It's the largest sit-in protest the city has seen in over 2 decades. Many wore shirts that said, "Not in our name." Banners were unfurled reading, "Palestinians should be free," and "Israelis demand ceasefire now." One sign read, "Never again for anyone." The multiracial, intergenerational movement says about 400 people were arrested, including rabbis, famous actors, and elected officials. Democracy Now! Was there. Today, we bring you some of the voices at Grand Central, including Rosalind Paczewski, professor of political science at Hunter College. Ceasefire now, ceasefire now, ceasefire now.
My name is Rosalind Paczewski. I'm here with maybe 1,000 others, a lot of us Jews, but we are here to protest the genocide that is happening in our name. It has to stop. We are crying every minute. When we listen to your show, we are crying. I have a dear friend, Mohammed, with his little family in Gaza. He almost got blown up today. We can't let this go on. We believe in justice and the right to live for everyone. But Palestinians have been the victims of oppression for 75 years, and it has to stop. That's why we're here, to say not in our name. I am older than the state of Israel.
There's Jewish prayers in the
base. But this is why it's so absurd, this equivocation that Israel and Zionists are ideologically defending themselves on the premise of, and that the U.S. right and really every mainstream politician in the U.S., this equivocation of Zionism and the state of Israel and Jewish people. And if you critique Israel, somehow you're anti-Semitic. It's absurd for so many reasons, one of which is the fact that a significant percentage of the global Jewish population is anti-Zionist, is against the state of Israel. And in the US, some of the leading organizations protesting against this genocidal war against the Palestinians have been these Jewish organizations.
Absolutely. And we talked about this before, but Orthodox Jews are the original anti-Zionists because
Right.
they opposed it on religious grounds. You know, they said that it says in the Torah that only God is supposed to, you know, establish an Israeli state. And they see it as an abomination that that Jewish people are trying to establish their own state. They're trying to do the work of God or force the work of God into existence. So that just totally blows apart the claim that standing against the apartheid state of Israel makes you anti-Semitic. I mean, that's an unbelievably stupid thing to say.
Absolutely.
But that's all they got.
The background, the sun is going down, and it's the Jewish Sabbath.
It is. And on Shabbat, we have to pray. We have to recommit ourselves to justice. I believe that Judaism and Jewish ethics, this is how I grew up thinking, are about justice and about Rabbi Hillel's statement, if I am not for myself, who am I? And if I'm only for me, what am I doing here? I glossed over it a little bit. And if not now, when? Now. Peace now. Ceasefire now. President Biden and Blinken, listen to what people are telling you, especially the young people and lots of Jews.
These are the
That's
people
beautiful.
who Corinne Jean-Pierre called disgraceful and repugnant.
Yeah.
Those are the people who don't want peace, who don't want genocide, who are exercising their civil right to freedom of speech and political expression and trying to get the Biden and Blinken administration to cease this ethnic cleansing that they're doing right in front of the entire world.
And it's also beautiful to see how they're approaching the issue. That lady there mentioned 75 years of ongoing oppression of the Palestinian people. The settlements start a little bit before that, but it's great to see because at the methodological level, it means that they're not just seeing this escalation of the extermination of the people of Gaza as an isolated event. Like they're understanding it a little bit more systematically. They're understanding it in its history and how this last month of terrorizing Palestinian lives is a product of a decades-long history, a century-long history, really. When you are able to understand things like that, it's a lot easier to make sense of the world and understand why it is that these things are going on. And you're also a lot more capable of understanding how to change it and how to transform what we currently have.
For sure. For sure.
All right. So it's not just Jewish people. One of the things we've always tried to emphasize is that this isn't about religion. This is about imperialism and the fact that Israel is a neocolonial outpost of the U.S. in the Middle East. And as RFK mentioned in a clip that we reacted to yesterday, without Israel, it'd be very hard for the U.S. to achieve its ends in the regions. And Israel plays a fundamental role for the control of resources that the U.S. Aspires to in the region, which has been at the root cause of all of the wars that we've seen unfold in the last 2, 3, 4 centuries in the Middle East. But this is a comrade from Oregon, I believe. She's a Christian Palestinian from Gaza, and she's going to urge us to use our voice to speak out. I know it's going to be difficult. The memo has been to label everyone that speaks out against genocide, anti-Semitic, and terrorist sympathizers. Do not fall for it. Do not fall for it. Use whatever voice you have to speak out against this. And she's also going to urge us to check out the BDS movement, the movement to boycott products and companies that are selling to Israel and that sell in Israel and that benefit from this ongoing occupation and genocide of the Palestinian people.
Hello, guys. I'm a Christian Palestinian from Gaza. I still have family who live there. I have my grandparents. I have my uncles. I have the people, my friends that I grew up with. I lived there for 15 years. I experienced 3 wars in my life. All we ask for is our land back. This is not about religion. We're Christians. There's Christians in Gaza. There's Muslims, Christians. This is not about any religion. This is about humanity. You gotta speak up. What's happening is a genocide. This is the worst war that I have ever seen in my whole life. I've experienced so many wars, but this is the worst one that I have seen. People, we can't reach them out. They don't have electricity, they don't have internet, nothing. We have not got a hold of our family for the past 24 hours. You guys gotta speak up. Boycott Starbucks, boycott Disney, boycott McDonald's, because this money is going to kill our people. They're killing our innocent children, innocent mothers, innocent dads. You gotta speak up. You can't stay quiet about this genocide.
That's awesome. Awesome to see. I wonder how many Christians are aware that there's a substantial Christian population in Gaza. I mean, we're being told that all of Gaza is just Hamas, which is being equated with ISIS constantly. And it's hard for America just to wrap their heads around the amount of civilian death that's going on. And, you know, even the state of Gaza, where 97% of the water is undrinkable, and even the Israeli Mossad says the conditions are unlivable. But, you know, let alone, I'm sure they don't know the demographics. I'm sure they don't know there's a lot of Christian people there. And of course, a lot of people in America have the same ideology as former Secretary of State and head of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, which is basically evangelical Christian Zionism, which believes in this end times prophecy where I believe it's once greater Israel is established, God will come down from the heavens and take up all the Christians and actually kill all the Jews. So it's actually a sort of suicidal death cult type of prophecy that's anti-Semitic in itself, because it says that all the Jewish people are not God's chosen people, so they're going to be wiped off the face of the earth when the end times comes. And there's a lot of people who believe this, and I know that because I grew up in an evangelical Christian church, and I was told my entire life, no matter what you stand with Israel, because that's part of this end times prophecy. Which, you know, if you think like, who could stand with Israel at this point? Who could support the murder of over 3,000 children? And those totals are probably much higher now. It's like, well, people who believe that in an end times prophecy, people who have this religious dogmatic faith in Israel and feel that they need to support them because Israel's been appointed by God. I mean, that's really the only way, the only ideology that you could use to justify what they're doing. Not the only one, but, you know, one of the only ones. So it's great to see more Christians saying, no, this is not something we can support.
Yeah, and the oppression of the Palestinian people has been across the board. There was videos coming out a little bit over a month ago of Christian priests and churchgoers getting spit on by Israeli citizens. Like the oppression is across the board. It's an ethno-state, and so anyone that's not part of that ethno-state clique, it's considered an other and is treated as if they are lesser than, as if they are not fully human or not up to the level of humanity of the regular Jewish Israeli. And, even African Jews are, face oppression in this Zionist fascist state. But one of the things that the young lady mentioned was the BDS movement. And for anyone that's not familiar, this is the BDS movement. They take their cues from similar boycott movements that were done against the apartheid government in South Africa, that were done in India and in other parts of the world. And here are some of the list of companies that they are boycotting. And you can see why it is that they're targeting a specific number of companies and not others, and what their strategy is, and the connections that these companies have with the apartheid state of Israel. So if anyone's interested in checking that out and seeing what part of the ruling capitalist class is in bed with genocide, and if you can afford to not support it, which is a very very easy things to afford. It's just don't go get Starbucks. Make your coffee at home or something, or get it somewhere else. If you can afford to do that, do so. It's very low effort, and if we all do it together, it does have some form of an impact monetarily on Israel. So, and these companies.
Yes. It's awesome. Thank you, GV Black, for gifting 5 Midwestern Marks memberships. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that that gift. For those who get the Midwestern Marks memberships, I'm not sure how the gifted memberships work, but be sure to take advantage of our Discord. By being a Midwestern Marks member, you get access to the Discord for the rest of your life. We'll never kick you out, even if you stop being a member. And if you're a $10 member, you get a copy of Carlos's newish book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, on PDF. So lots of perks to take advantage of. Thank you, GV Black. All of our funding at the Midwestern Marx Institute comes from you, the people. So we're extremely appreciative. Very generous of you. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, GV Black.
Thank you, Conrad. This is a good comment from Julie, our friend Julie. Guys, did you know that Israelis have been speaking against their government's decision to bring in 100,000 Indian workers? It was Modi who wanted to send in 100,000 Indian workers and to kick out the Palestinian workers that are in India, to bring in 100K Indian workers to replace Palestinians because they don't want, quote, any brown people walking the streets. Yeah, they're extremely racist. It's not just, this is a point that Maduro made, and Maduro has been making consistently. It isn't just a war against the Palestinian. These are the immediate targets, but it's a war against humanity at large. It's at its root a supremacist project that sees brown people, black people, and the people who geostrategically are in places that that the U.S. has been fighting to control their resources and their population's labor. It's been waging a war against Yemen and Syria and other countries in the region. And it's not just Palestinians. It's just the focus should be now on Palestine. But they're extremely racist. They're racist against the African Jews that are within Israel, and it's horrible. But we do have to understand that it's not those racist attitudes that are propelling the economic activities. It's the economic ends that they have as an outpost of imperialism that, in order to justify those activities, need that racism. They need to dehumanize these populations in order to then justify and legitimize what it is that they're doing.
Yeah, I saw a clip today of somebody who was from apartheid South Africa and had was obviously in favor of the racist apartheid there, who had then moved to Israel and joined the IDF to fight against the Arabs. That gives you a good idea of the kind of people. There was also the Minnesota Vikings kicker Greg Joseph, who posted a picture on Twitter or on Instagram of Gaza and claimed that it was Israel and said, pray for Israel. It was a bunch of buildings that had been bombed, and it was actually a refugee camp that Israel bombed. And he put it under a post donating all this money. Also, someone from South Africa, a wealthy white man from South Africa who likes the way the state of Israel is structured. And actually, when I did my movie review of District 9, which is an alien invasion movie that makes a criticism of apartheid societies like South Africa, we talked about a lot about the parallels between apartheid South Africa and apartheid Israel. And, that kind of society and that kind of system, which is driven by economics, like Carlos said, or driven by productive interests, breeds racism in the people. And we see that now with Israeli society, a deeply, deeply racist society. There are videos like Abby Martin's video where she's talking to people in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or something, talking to Israeli citizens who are just openly calling for the genocide of Arab Palestinians and telling them to go live in other countries. And yeah, it's deeply racist, as are most of the people who support it, even folks like Destiny who try and pretend like they're objective. they end up falling into these deeply, deeply racist and reactionary arguments to try and defend the apartheid state of Israel.
Yeah, and on that note, I think it'd be good to go to our segment on the GOP vampires and the comments that they made, all of which were kind of the same. The comments that they made on the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. So let's give that a quick watch. This is from Al Jazeera.
This was unfolding before the world, and any of these candidates were sitting in the Oval Office. The call to Israel's leadership would not be one of restraint, but escalation.
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them.
I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border. And then I'll tell him as president of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border.
You must go in and make sure that Hamas can never do this again.
I would tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, not only do you have the responsibility and the right to wipe Hamas off of the map, we will support you.
And some pledged to escalate U.S. involvement against Iranian-backed forces in the region.
I would say
These are the same fucking people that turn around and say, America first, America first.
Yeah.
So we're going to send billions in taxpayer dollars so that fucking Israel can keep killing kids, one kid every fucking 15 minutes.
And like I said, Israel has free government-funded healthcare. So, these guys pretend to be, government-funded healthcare is socialism. Well, is Israel socialist? Why are you giving them $3.8 billion of our tax money so that they can have healthcare and do a genocide? I thought you were fiscally responsible. Like, these guys are bags of slime.
Oh, my God. Yeah, it's the pinnacle of, dangerous stupidity. It'd be funny if it wasn't the fact that these are, half of the leaders that are leading the country. The other half thinks the same. They're just not as stupid sometimes in the way that they speak.
you harm a hair on the head of an American service member, and you are going to have hell to pay.
Iran responds to strength.
What about the 60 UN people that have been killed by Israel? But magically, every time it's reported on, they never mention that they're killed by Israeli bombs.
And you harm a hair on the American's head. Well, why are there American troops in their region? It's their country. Their country. Palestine doesn't have troops here. And if they did, you'd be calling them Hamas terrorists and saying they need to get out.
Right. You punch them one and you punch them hard and they will back off.
There seemed to be a consensus on cracking down on colleges that allow pro-Palestinian protests, potentially cutting off their funding and kicking foreign students out of the country.
These are the free speech people that are in favor of censoring the right to speech of kids in college campuses.
If they participate. The war in Gaza was the first policy questions and answers of the debate. Notably, in the 2 hours that followed, there wasn't a single question, a single statement, or even the mere mention of Palestinians and their plight. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
There you go. There's that traditional American duplicity, that spinelessness and hypocrisy, where people say one thing through one side and then say and support something completely contradictory on the other side.
And this is how the Democrats and the Republicans work together. Because the Republicans are using blatantly genocidal rhetoric, talking about finish them, wipe them off the map, like they're having a competition to see who can sound like the most sadistic, war-worshipping psycho. And then the Democrats come out and say, oh, we're committed to human rights. We're committed to, protecting democracy and freedom in the region. And they dress it up with all this rhetoric when this is being led by the Blinken-Biden administration, when they're the ones leading this giant military buildup in Israel, when they're the ones who increased funding to Israel even more than the Trump administration did. They have the exact same policies as the Republicans. They just have less bloodthirsty rhetoric. So all these Democrats on TikTok and elsewhere are able to say, well, they're still the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, the substance is the same. It's just the appearance that's different. Thank you so much to the comrades from the Fine Arts Revolution for the $5 super chat. 2024 is going to be wild. Yes, it is indeed. I think it's either 24 or 25 that U.S. generals have also predicted we'd be at war with China by. But Yeah, it's we're approaching years where we're going to continue to see weeks where decades happen, and it's just how the world works when it's transitioning at the global level from one form of life into another, from one era into another, more specifically. Thank you so much, though. Happy Fridays, brothers. Happy Friday to you all as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fine Art Revolution, one of our longtime supporters. Really appreciate all the financial support you've given to the Institute. And I know you helped fund my big trip this weekend to Los Angeles, so I appreciate you for that as well.
The next clip I wanted to show is from Ilhan Omar. We've been very critical of the Squad and the Social Democrats, but we've also been amongst the first to congratulate them when they actually do something that is on the side of the people. So let's give this a watch. This is a speech that Omar gave shortly after Rashida Tlaib's speech in favor of Palestinians, and 22 people in the Democratic Party voted to censor her. So let's give this a quick watch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is glaring hypocrisy when you have Republicans on the other side of the aisle trying to create definitions and say Rashida wants to annihilate people, when Max Miller himself went on TV and said we're turning Gaza into a parking lot and we want to annihilate Palestinians. Nobody condemned him on that side of the aisle. What is true here is that every single one of them has not acknowledged the fact that Palestinians are dying in the tens of thousands, but will continue to say it is us who are not acknowledging humanity. Rashida will stand strong.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Movement will continue for liberation until every single
Gentlelady's
Palestinian
time has expired.
has the right to
Gentleman
live
from
in
Maryland
liberty.
is recognized.
That's beautiful to see. A little bit partisan. The focus was the Republicans, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. I saw Jamal Bowman gave a similar speech that went somewhat viral, also aimed at Republicans. But in his speech, he brought up that Rashida Tlaib is the only person in Congress with Palestinian roots. The only person in Congress who can somewhat represent Palestine. And what are they trying to do? A lot of Democrats and all the Republicans are trying to censor her, to silence her. And I mean, it doesn't get more obvious than that. You know, when you have one Palestinian person who's like, hey, maybe we should worry about the 3,000 kids we massacred this week. And they're just like, shut the fuck up. Shut up. Silence her. Censor her. All these jackasses who claim to be in favor of free speech and claim to be warriors for free speech. They're now calling to make lists of college kids who are protesting for Palestine. They're calling for people to be fired from their jobs. They're calling for the only Palestinian congresswoman to be censored. I mean, it's insane. I don't know how these people live with themselves. They have no spine. They have no principles. They're nothing but puppets of their corporate donors and corporate lobbyists who say whatever they think is going to be popular with their constituency or is going to keep them in power. I mean, if you allow any right winger to call themselves a free speech warrior after what we've seen in the last few weeks, I mean, you're out of your mind. They are nothing but grifters who use being a free speech crusader to grow their online profiles and help grow their grift. But it's nothing but a lie and a grift. And these people are puppets and spineless cowards who need to honestly be overthrown, by an organized movement of the working class. We need a serious revolutionary party that's educating people about political theory, that's putting forward a real plan for building a new government, an actually democratic government that serves the people, and calling for what these people deserve, for them to be overthrown, to them to be forcefully ousted from office because they don't represent the will of the people. The vast majority of people believe that Congress doesn't serve us. And then a whole bunch of them need to be tried at The Hague. A whole bunch of them need to be dragged and tried for war crimes and put in jail for the rest of their lives. Folks like George Bush and Kissinger and Madeleine Albright and Hillary Clinton, a bunch of people on the Democratic side. So that's the goal. That's what we need, is a party that advocates for that, a party that's theoretically educated, deeply so that we understand the current conflict as being produced by capitalism and imperialism and capitalist relations of production, and calls for what's necessary, not just chastising the Republicans when they do something bad, but overthrowing the Republican Party, overthrowing the Democratic Party, and having a government where issues are debated by the masses, and a government that acts based on the democratic will of the people.
That's beautifully said, brother. And there's a historical document that founded some state. I don't know which, can't remember which one. But in that document, it said that when the government oppresses the people and is not genuinely of, by, and for the people not only have the right, but the duty to overthrow that government. That was the Declaration of Independence. And it's one of the great ironies of history that the one state that was founded amongst one of the principles of overthrowing governments that don't represent the people has been at the forefront historically of preventing the genuine people's movements that try to do just that.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at how, and you can, obviously we don't share the same ideology as Hamas. They're an Islamic nationalist group. We're a Marxist-Leninist group. But just look at how Americans react to these people fighting for self-determination, for the Palestinians. Of course, any American, literally Republicans were singing a song like earlier this year, try that in a small town, saying, if you come to my town and you try and mess with me and my family, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kick you out of my town. Me and my buddies are going to get our guns and we're going to throw you out. But then when the Palestinians have all of their land seized to the point where 75% of them are living in refugee status, and they take up guns to try and get their land back, to try and stop their children from being killed, Americans are the first to condemn them. And it's like, they have completely lost touch with our revolutionary history. And the media has so many not all Americans, of course, and more are waking up, but they have so many Americans brainwashed about what's going on around the world. And one of my favorite maps that's been produced is the map of, imagine if this happened to you, and it's Israel slowly taking over more and more American land until we're all pushed into Oregon or something. We're all pushed into a corner of the country. Of course, people would fight back. Of course, there would be Christian nationalist militias rising up and fighting back. And Americans would be in favor of that. They would be in favor of a revolutionary movement that seizes people's land back for them. But when it's another country, when it's brown people, when it's Arabs, the media has all these ways of twisting it and convincing you that they're terrorists.
Yeah, it's a form of what Hegel called collective self-deception. People say on one side that these are their values, these are the sort of things that they act on and the things that they would condemn in action, but then in their actual activity, they act in completely contradictory ways and do the things that they say in terms of their values that they wouldn't do, and then not support the things that in terms of their values fully align. And according to Hegel, at least, once spirit gets to that moment of collective self-deception, it begins to crumble. So we'll see if the prophecy from Comrade Hegel is real. But a few comrades in the chat mentioned Claire Daly's, is it Daly or Daly?
I think it's Daly.
Daly. Claire Daly's speech, she's tremendous. It's the democratic socialists that we have in office here don't get to the ankles of her and Mick Wallace, I believe. So let's give it a watch. This is from a few hours ago. I think it's the one that the folks in the chat are talking about.
Thanks, President. A month has elapsed since the commencement of the unrelenting mass murder of Palestinians in Gaza. It's not a spiral of violence, Frau von der Leyen. It's genocide, openly declared and carried out by the apartheid state of Israel. Starvation, bombing, hospitals, ambulances, journalists, humanitarian routes, 10,000 dead, 1 in 200 Gazans killed, a Palestinian child slaughtered every 10 minutes for a month. And Frau von der Leyen's answer to this graveyard for children is to tell Israel to avoid civilians, be as targeted as you can. Well, that displays some neck. You can't even call for it to stop. You can't even call for a ceasefire. Well, of course you can't, because these crimes against humanity are being carried out with your weapons in your name when you stood with Israel a month ago and you said you'd stand with them now and in the days to come. So don't come in here trying to wipe the blood off with belated concern. It's not just Israel's genocide, it's yours, and The Hague isn't good enough for you.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
Ooh. Fire. Drop the mic, Claire Daly.
Jesus Christ. That was one of the most emotional fucking speeches I've seen in the last month.
That was incredible. I know they say people, a lot of times it takes more than facts to change people's minds. You know, it takes how those facts are presented, or for a lot of people, it's probably been seeing the death and destruction caused in the Gaza Strip through social media. And that's the kind of speech that changes people's mind. That's the kind of speech that moves people to action.
No, absolutely. That was extremely powerful. And yeah, the speeches that she's been giving the last couple of years, hoping to prevent the onslaught of the proxy war against Russia, and speaking out in the scariest moments when it looked like, you know, nuclear Armageddon was around the corner. She's excellent. She's amongst the best voices that the international working class has in this moment. So love to see it.
Absolutely. I think I saw a comment that said free speech warriors also support a regime that regularly arrests Palestinians based on private text messages so long as they deem it pro-Hamas. And they'll arrest anybody who speaks out against the Israeli government or does anything that's supposedly pro-terrorism, which, you know, is decided by the Israeli courts, which recently there was a move to make the Israeli courts even more top-down and even more dictatorial and even more Zionist. So I actually did a TikTok about this earlier, and about the myth, the lie that Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East, when in fact they're doing these fascistic campaigns to silence Israeli and Palestinian society and silence any critique of the government or any support for Palestine.
Let's give that video a watch.
Listen, I get that Israel's not perfect, but we have to support them. They're the only democracy in the Middle East. Oh, you think so, do you? Watch this.
انت موقف استنى شوي زين انت موقف في اتهام في نشر كلمات مديح تعاطف وتشجيع العمل الارهابي لا دعم استنى شوي دعم مستحيل تعريف قياس اعلانات تعرض على العنف.
What was that? That was the Israeli police arresting a woman for her social media posts. Yeah, that doesn't seem very democratic. No, it does not. Kind of seems like something that would happen in 1930s Germany if you spoke out against the regime, or 1930s Italy. Yeah. So Israel's not a democracy then? Not even a little. Arab people in the region are literally systematically deprived of their political rights. Gotcha. Well, can you play the rest of that video? Maybe it was some kind of a misunderstanding. Yeah, for sure. It cuts off right when they start dragging the lady out of her house. Oh, jeez.
تعريف قياس الاعلانات تعرض على العنف والارهاب الكشف عن الانتماء الى منظمه ارهابيه.
And the part that really got to me there, and the part that made me decide I need to make a video about this, was her screaming, no, I support Israel, I swear. Like, dude, that literally sounds like it's out of a movie. That sounds like it's out of a fictionalized movie about Nazi Germany during World War II. No, I support the regime, I swear. Don't drag me from my home, police officers. I swear I support the regime. You know, I give my undying loyalty and fealty to the regime. Don't throw me in a jail cell. All right, that's literally what they're doing. Is anybody who doesn't support the regime, anyone who makes social media posts that they don't like, are getting dragged off and thrown in jail. What the hell do you call that except for fascism? What do you call that except for fascism? And, you know, that's what went on in Hitler's Germany. That's what went on in Mussolini's Italy. That's what went on in post-2014 Ukraine. And that's what's going on in Israel in 2023. These are fascistic regimes who have been propped up every step of the way by the United States, because the empire always sides with fascism and fuels fascism when it's in their political and economic interests.
While the whole time they tell their population that it's only communists and communist states who act like this. You won't see this sort of shit from Cuba. You could still see a bunch of gusaneria on social media from fucking people in Cuba who I personally think the government should do something about, but whatever. Posting a bunch of gusano shit funded by the rats in Miami. You still see that coming out of Cuba, and people are not fucking showing up at their doors, arresting them for doing so. You see, critical opinions coming out of China. You see critical opinions coming out of Venezuela. Like all of these socialist states have the capacity for the people that don't like the state to comment on social media freely. But we're told that it's communists who crack down on free speech and do all these sorts of things. But in reality, it's always the fascistic states that capitalism has always supported, propped up, and benefited from. So there you go. People were mentioning in the comments the terror. It's almost like if it's out of a movie. Like it's so easy to put yourself into her fear and the terror that she was experiencing. It's horrific.
Absolutely. And this is the irony, as I pointed out in that video, is they're calling Israel the only democracy in the Middle East. They're the only democracy. Is that what democracy is? When people get arrested for voicing their opinions on social media? Is that what freedom is? And of course, we know it's hypocrisy when the U.S. says this, but it's just so blatant there when they're calling this place the only democracy in the Middle East, and then the Israeli police are going around and arresting its own civilians for saying the wrong stuff. Straight Nazi shit. It is. I mean, what else do you call that? What else do you call that? Oh yeah, let's answer this.
Thank you so much, Molly McGuire, for the $20 super chat. Thank you. This is a people's funded institute, so any help is always tremendously appreciated. A little something extra for Eddie's trip between the ongoing G word and the wage slavery. I really needed this stream. Thank you so much, Molly, and hopefully this trip will help convince people at a scale that we don't usually have the reach to about our ideas, which are deeply human ideas. We love humanity. We want a world in which every human being can flourish and they're not being oppressed and alienated and exploited all their lives. So hopefully, we can reach more hearts and minds with this trip.
Absolutely. I think it'll be worth it. Again, I can't say what I'm doing yet, but it will be worth it. It's going to help us reach a giant audience and hopefully grow the Midwestern Marks community. And I'm glad you enjoyed the stream and look forward to the streams, and that these streams are cathartic or help you wrap your head around all the wage slavery and exploitation and alienation and ongoing genocide that we see every day. We're building a real community, real group of people who can fight back against it. So just take it one day at a time and keep doing your best. We really appreciate the financial support, but also the support in general, the support of what we do at the Institute. So,
and keep fighting the information war. Israel is losing. The vast majority of people online, and specifically in the global South, they haven't bought any of the bullshit that they've been putting out. So keep fighting the information war, sharing the truth, retweeting it, quote tweeting it, doing whatever you have to do to get the truth out there.
You bet. Today 100 viewers, tomorrow 10,000. Absolutely. That's going to happen soon. Thank you, Cade Grenade. $10 super sticker. Our FedEx employee extraordinaire, Cade Grenade, longtime viewer of the show. Appreciate you, Cade Grenade. You're the man. Hope everything's going well with you. Yeah, same thing that we've said for all the super chats. Really, really appreciate that. All our funding for the Institute comes from you, and we're using it to do big things. We're using it to really grow and really, I'll be flying to LA now. That's the biggest and farthest trip that we've done for the Institute, other than Carlos going to Mexico recently. But yeah, we're going to use that money to grow the Institute and further the revolution. Andre Sig gifted 10 Midwestern Marx memberships. Holy cow, I don't think I've ever seen anyone gift that many memberships. I'm not exactly sure how the gifted memberships work. I assume you're giving them away to 10 people in the audience. So incredibly generous. Thank you so much. That's such a cool thing to do, because you're not only giving money to the Institute and Midwestern Marx and what we do, but you're giving people memberships, which gets them access to the Discord, which gets them access to Carlos's book if they're a member at a certain level. And join that Discord, please, please, please. The link is in our community tab. Join the Discord if you're a member, because that's where you can communicate directly with us. We have moderators in the Discord who are there to answer questions for you, teach you about theory, stuff like that. So I'm actually, since we just got 10 gifted memberships, I'm going to make sure that we have a fresh Discord link available for people on the YouTube community tab. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we had 5 gifted earlier as well. So
absolutely, yeah. I will make sure that people have access to that right
Thank
now.
you so much, Comrade Andrew. I also to connect with Comrade Cade, our FedEx fella. I wanted to pull up one of the stories that I wanted to mention today. The American Postal Workers Union, representing more than 200,000 workers, has just called for a ceasefire. This is, I think, one of the most important and interesting developments that we've had in the anti-genocide movement, because the working class is the heart of this mode of life. If the working class says stop, capitalism comes down tumbling. So when we can see working class people get on board with the ceasefire, that is tremendous. You know, it's beautiful to see people in the streets, and it's beautiful to see these massive protests. Last week, we had 300,000 people in the streets calling for a ceasefire and marching on Washington. But when the working class gets together, and a union like this that represents more than 200,000 American workers calls for a ceasefire, the weight that brings is it's a lot heavier than many other things that we could do. So the more, the merrier.
For sure. Could not agree more. Another one, Popers, constant, someone who loves to gift Midwestern Marx memberships. We really appreciate you, Popers. You've done a lot for the Institute. Plus, you're always here in the streams learning. And another one, holy cow, back to back. All right, thank you. So now we've got 17 people. That should be 17 new people joining the Midwestern Marx Discord server, or reading Carlos's new book, or taking advantage of all those perks. So thank you for helping us grow our community and grow our Institute. And like I said, we are committed to furthering socialist ideas, spreading socialist ideas, building a new economic and political system geared towards humanity and human ends rather than profit ends and exploitation. So every dollar or cent that you donate to the Midwestern Marx Institute is put towards those ends. So appreciate you all very much.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you know, we sometimes treat it a little abstractly and in a disconnected fashion, but what we're fighting for is a world in which everyone's comfortable, everyone has their needs met. If you want to take on creative projects and do woodwork or art or, you know, theory and study the ancients or you would have all of the resources and the time necessary to do all of that fulfilling work, because we have developed the forces of production to a point where the needs of everyone can be readily met with the least amount of possible necessary labor. And the forces of production are already there. They're already tremendously advanced. We already produce at an abundance scale where we have a problem of waste as opposed to a problem of scarcity in most areas. So it's us, it's there for our taking. So that's the world that we're fighting for. And it's always important to remember that.
Scarcity?
What?
Did you say scarcity?
No. The opposite. I'm saying that as opposed to...
No, but isn't it scarcity? I'm being a nerd right now. But...
Oh, in terms of pronunciation, shut up. You're from Wisconsin. You say You call Hegel Hagel. You're talking to me about scarcity.
I just really like the local Hagel's Bagels. It's my favorite store in
You
town.
heard of Elf on a Shelf? How about Hegel on a Bagel?
Once we get enough Midwestern Marks donations, we will open a Midwestern Marks like brick and mortar place, and we will also have a place called Hagel's Bagels. And there'll be like a library, and you can get bagels. Thank you so much, Winged Nomina.
Numina.
$20.
Now it's my turn to fix you. Numina. Counts thing in itself. Ding on sich. That's it's part of the Kantian dualism of noumena and phenomena. Noumena is the thing in itself, and then phenomena is the thing how it is for us. He makes the argument that because we have this mediation at play, we can't really engage with the world how it is in itself. So I think that is what the name is hinting at. I may have overanalyzed it, but thank you so much for the $20.
Yes, that's a huge donation. Thank you. Feel free to ask a question later. We'll try and get to it. Yeah, appreciate all the super chats we've gotten. You want to go to the next video about October 7th, Carlos? Because I feel like this was one of the biggest bombshell reports that's been released in the last few weeks. I mean, this is something I brought up in the debate with Destiny. I said there is overwhelming evidence that Israel fired on their own civilians on October 7th and were using them basically as human shields. And he laughed that argument off and said that there's no evidence for that outside of Twitter and TikTok. So what I did was what the Gray Zone did and Middle East Monitor did was compiled all the eyewitness reports from Israeli citizens who were there talking about how the Israeli military did in fact fire on their own civilians. There were reports from Haaretz, which is an Israeli newspaper, and there were even reports from Israeli military personnel who were flying Apache helicopters saying they basically didn't know what they were firing at. So overwhelming evidence, as we're going to see here in this TikTok, and overwhelming evidence that Destiny is a liar.
Yeah. No, this is tremendously important. And honestly, if you're trusting what these imperialists are saying from the beginning, it's like, what are you doing? They've always lied, and there's a specific type of lie that they always develop early on in these sorts of affairs, which is a lie that is aimed at getting to people's emotion. It's called atrocity propaganda. They give you an atrocity that supposedly happened. You feel extremely outraged by it, and you let your emotions get you into supporting a policy that's actually going to bring about atrocities. And this whole atrocity this whole extermination of the Palestinian people that we've seen over the last month and some change has been legitimized consistently by appeals to October 7th and terrorist acts that did not occur, that were baseless from the start, like the 40 beheaded babies or whatever, and to deaths of people that the vast majority of them were IDF. The others that weren't were former IDF. And the vast majority of the ones that died in general were killed in the crossfire between the IDF and Hamas. So it wasn't even Hamas murdering them. So it was all bullshit. It came out eventually, as it always does. The lie can last 1,000 years. The truth always catches it in a second. It's an old Marti quote. But there was still so many people, specifically on the so-called progressive left, that fell for it and fell for the, yes, I condemn Hamas, but no, it's bullshit. They're the what you would call the hindsight anti-imperialists. The people that always accept whatever the imperialists put out at the beginning, and then after it's been disproven as it always is, then they change their mind and then they adjust their rhetoric after it's not that important anymore. But let's give it a watch.
So the Middle East Monitor and other outlets have now compiled a large number of Israeli news reports and eyewitness testimonies that say the Israeli military fired on their own citizens on October 7th. This greatly contributed to the death and destruction that day, as well as the civilian deaths, which Israel then blamed completely on Hamas. In my recent debate with the popular online streamer Destiny, I tried explaining this to him, but he said the only sources were from Twitter and TikTok. So let's go through these eyewitness testimonies, none of which I got from TikTok. Tuval Escapa, a member of the security team for one of the kibbutzes that was attacked, said that as desperation began to set in, the commanders in the field made difficult decisions, including shelling houses on their occupants in order to eliminate the terrorists along with the hostages. So openly admitting that the Israeli military was shelling Israeli homes with civilians inside. Another report published in the Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, said that Israeli forces called for an airstrike on...
Can I just say real quick, this is a beautiful video, but to connect it to other affairs, it's like Ukraine. It's like Ukraine. Like on one side, these people claim to be the representatives of the common good of their people. In reality, they're the first ones that are willing to take their people's own lives if it serves the geopolitical interests of their state as a puppet of the American empire in general. The same thing was going on in Ukraine. There were civilians that were trying to escape certain cities and were prevented from doing so by the fascistic battalions within the Ukrainian army, and people that were killed needlessly, but as a result of the actions of the Ukrainian military forces themselves. So here we're seeing it in a much more direct form, but we should always remember that none of these states actually represent the regular people that they make claims to represent.
Their own facility inside the Erez crossing, despite the fact that the facility was filled with Israeli officials and soldiers. And again, this is an Israeli paper. I'm not getting this from Twitter or TikTok, Destiny. In another eyewitness testimony, an Israeli woman named Yasmin Porat confirmed in an interview with Israeli radio that the military undoubtedly killed numerous Israeli non-combatants during the gun battles. They eliminated everyone, including the hostages, she stated, referring to the Israeli special forces. In another interview, she said that it was Israeli tank shelling which led to many casualties among Israelis. An outlet directly connected to the Israeli Foreign Ministry said that small homes were bombarded and destroyed. Well-maintained lawns were ripped up by the tracks of armored vehicles, perhaps a tank. And I don't know if you know this, but Hamas doesn't have tanks, so a lot of this damage had to be done by Israel. Additionally, Israel was heavily using Apache attack helicopters, and one of the pilots said, "I find myself in a dilemma as to what to shoot at, because there are so many of them." It was also reported in the Middle East Monitor that the Apache pilots realized there was tremendous difficulty in distinguishing within the occupied outposts and settlements who was a terrorist and who was a soldier or civilian. The rate of fire was tremendous at first, and only at a certain point did the pilots begin to slow down and carefully select their targets. So really a great deal of reporting and eyewitness testimonies here that suggest Israel did in fact fire on their own civilians, while their government and military are refusing to release the full details of the attack. And of course, people will still say this was provoked by Hamas, but of course we know that Hamas and the Palestinians were provoked by Israel's 70-plus year-long occupation and apartheid, which was killing one Palestinian child per day before this war ever started. But people are waking up. No more letting the corporate media and Israeli government lie to us, or their foot soldiers like Destiny. So just evidence on evidence. I mean, an unbelievable amount of evidence there, even, and it really, also shows you how Destiny talks out of his ass and just makes stuff up when it serves his argument. But I mean, he's less important. What's more important is that we know now that Israel fired on their own civilians and then lied about it, dealt all this damage, sprayed Israeli civilians with Apache attack helicopters, and then blamed all the damages on Hamas. Literally, they were calling this, their version of 9/11, which, I mean, I guess maybe it's not really 9/11 because they inflicted the damage on their own civilians, but then maybe in that way it is kind of like 9/11. But yeah.
Building 7. No, but yeah, I mean, the imperialists have always acted like this. Those plans that were rejected by RFK, that might be a good segue into the RFK, not RFK, JFK. The JFK segment, but there was plans to bomb Tampa, Washington, Miami, and blame it on Cuba and use that as a justification to go to war with Cuba. So what does that mean? Well, let's kill our own people blame it on our enemy so that we could stoke the people into supporting our war with our quote unquote enemy, which isn't really the people's enemy, it's the enemy of the elite. So these sorts of activities, they just end up taking different forms in different contexts, but they're part of the imperialist toolbox. The imperialists and the ruling class of the imperialist countries, they don't represent their people. If they have to sacrifice their people in order to achieve their ends, they will. So we should always be worrisome, especially when the events pop off of the narrative that they're trying to spin, and always look at it and take it with a grain of salt if we're going to take it at all, or wait, because it's usually the case that within a few weeks or a month, it's confirmed that it was all baseless bullshit used to target your emotions and get you to support the activities that would align you effectively with the imperialists.
Everybody's an anti-imperialist in hindsight. Before you jump to conclusions, especially based around atrocity propaganda, why don't you just wait? Think about the time that they said Gaddafi was giving his soldiers Viagra so they could commit more sexual assaults, or when they said that Iraqi soldiers were taking babies out of incubators and leaving them on the floor to die. We always find out these stories aren't true, but or they're a stretch of the truth. So why not just take them with a grain of salt when they're coming out and be skeptical? I see a tweet, or Mauricio just became a member for 2 months. Thank you so much, Mauricio. I got a chance to meet Mauricio in real life at a conference. Really awesome. He's a baller. He's a basketball player. So hope that's going well for you, Mauricio. But I think this is an interesting statement. Israel is an anti-Semitic entity. Yes, I mean, as Carlos has pointed out multiple times, the Palestinian people are Semitic. So Israel is killing a Semitic people and then telling you that if you're against it, you're anti-Semitic, which makes no sense. But like I said earlier, too, Orthodox Jews were the first people to oppose Israel, right? And then you have these Zionists, these far-right extremists, these ethno-nationalists conflating, support for Palestine with being anti-Semitic. That in itself is an idea that totally ignores the existence of Orthodox Jews and is, could be called anti-Semitic towards Orthodox Jews, to say they're not real Jews, they're not real Jewish people because they don't support the state of Israel. That in itself can be anti-Semitic, not to mention all the anti-Semitic sentiment that is bred by Israel's actions, right? The people who just look at that and do wrongfully blame Jewish people rather than blaming the economic roots and the imperialist roots that founded the state of Israel. It creates a lot more anti-Semitic sentiment in the world just because of Israel's action. So I 100% agree with what Mauricio is saying here. Despite the fact that Israel calls anybody who won't support it anti-Semitic, it itself is an anti-Semitic entity that does more to breed anti-Semitism in the world today than really anyone else.
That's beautiful.
Not to mention one more thing, but not to mention all the fake, phony claims of anti-Semitism that are put out by like AIPAC and the Israeli lobby that then make, people downplay real cases of anti-Semitism. It's like the boy who cried wolf. So last point.
Oh yeah, that's beautifully said. It's been a systematic part of their rhetoric. Accuse anyone that criticizes it of being anti-Semitic, and no one wants to be anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is horrific, but being anti-Zionist is in no way, shape, or form being anti-Semitic. Just to answer real quick, Harold Dogbottom's question. Yeah, it's the operation was called Operation Northwood. Here's the official declassified document. And the plan was to participate in the communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area and other Florida cities and in Washington, where they would bomb civilians and then blame it on the Cuban government in order to stoke hostilities towards Cuba and achieve consent amongst the populace for an even more intensified war against Cuba.
For sure. That's interesting comment there. There's your stupid said I don't want to focus on Destiny too much because he's such a clown, but he recently got slammed by Dan Cohen just a few days after he got slammed by me, which was awesome to see. And I made a video about this, what you're saying, the video of Destiny saying he's pro-genocide and laughing. Yeah, I made a TikTok about that, and it's currently blowing up pretty good because it's you know, he's using all this rhetoric, and he's an articulate guy, but he's using all this liberal rhetoric to try and dance around the fact that he's supporting genocide, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid. I mean, he'll admit that he admitted in our debate that Israel's an ethno state and that the Nakba was ethnic cleansing, but then says Israel's not expansionist and we should support them because every time they kill Arab people, it was the Arabs who attacked first. So, you know, just repeating the same old Zionist lies while trying to pretend he's not supporting genocide. But then you look at this clip that's resurfacing now, and he's explicitly supporting genocide, saying, I am pro-genocide, and then laughing, but then seriously saying, you know, the Palestinians need to go live somewhere else, you know, because they're so anti-Semitic, they got to go live somewhere else. And these European and American white settlers who are stealing their land should be able to keep their land and keep stealing it and keep displacing them. So, yes, I have seen that video, and it's going viral on my TikTok now. So, suck it, Destiny, you blue-haired freak. The propaganda campaign is like a carbon copy of 9/11. So many red flags and aggressive brainwashing against all Muslims. Early 2000s nostalgia. Absolutely. I was thinking the same thing. I remembered there were studies of Islamophobic violence that found terror attacks against Muslim people in America by white people increased during the war on terror and when they were beating the war drums for Iraq, because there was so much anti-Muslim sentiment pumped out by the news media, by the entertainment media, by our politicians, and very similar things going on here. They're just, you know, trying to conflate Hamas with ISIS, which is ridiculous. And ISIS was created by the U.S. Jihadi terrorism has been propped up by the U.S. in West Asia. Hamas is a much different group. They're a group that formed, a resistance group that formed because of the Israeli apartheid. They're not a group like ISIS that formed in the chaos in the power vacuum that was created by the U.S. when they toppled the Iraqi government. So, but what they try and do is just say, you know, all the people in West Asia, they're all Muslims and they all have this crazy jihadi terrorist ideology, and lump them all together. And then they just say that there are terrorist attacks going on against the state of Israel, and ignore the entire history of the state of Israel and ignore all the terrorist actions by Israel themselves. So, yeah, it's very similar propaganda, as is every batch of regime change propaganda, honestly.
Yeah, and Hamas is also a political entity that has been able to win elections, and that has popular support, at least from the people of Gaza. I can't imagine that they won't have it from the people of the West Bank, considering everything they've done in order to fight against the Zionist entity. Yeah, there's you can't. You're talking about apples and pears, you know, two completely different things. But thank you so much. I agree, Cordy. It's the same thing with Russia. You've had this very anti-Russia sentiment that was then translated into this new affair that needs that requires the dehumanization of Russians so that we can have a populace that's pro-proxy war. We've had this long anti-Muslim sentiment that has been a necessary component of the wars that we've waged in the Middle East, and now we just hark back to it, and it's, you know, we're seeing crimes against Muslims in the U.S. Spike. And some horrific stories like the one of the landlord that killed, you know, a 7-year-old kid, I think, with 20-something stabs. It's just horrific. But that's what imperialist dehumanization leads to in every single instance. So,
absolutely. I heard people saying too, there's all this, you keep hearing people say there's all these attacks against Jewish people now. There's all these anti-Semitic attacks going on. You know, I'm sure that that's happened and that's horrible in the instances that it's happened, but I haven't heard anybody talk about the landlord who killed a Palestinian child or killed a child because he was Muslim, or the uptick in attacks against Muslim people that we always see when Islamophobic propaganda is coming from the news media. So thank you, Andrew Ray, for the good fight. Have a safe trip. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you. We've raised enough money to pay for the whole trip to LA, thanks to people like you. Thank you so much. Now I guess I can get a Snickers bar in the airport. But it's so cool. Like I was telling telling my parents and actually telling my barber today when I was getting my hair cut, like, yeah, our audience basically paid for the trip. And they're like, wow, like those must be some dedicated people who really believe in what you're doing. I'm like, hell yeah, they are. So thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, brother. This is a people's funded institute. It's the People's Institute. So all these donations, we're tremendously grateful for them. I have a few other videos that I wanted to pull up. The stream plan is basically like 3 million videos. But this was interesting. This was sent to us by the comrade Amina, who is sharing with us a video of more than 200 workers at the, I think, L3 Harris plant. I don't know if they're workers from the L3 Harris plant or just workers in general, but the L3 Harris company is weapons manufacturers, and they send a lot of weapons to Israel. So they've been protesting outside of it, and here are some clips from that today.
People dead! 10,000 people dead! L3 Harris, your hands are red! L3 Harris, your hands are red! 5,000 children dead! 5,000 children dead! 5,000 children dead! 5,000 children!
That's beautiful to see, and it's great to see that the labor movement in Canada is getting involved in the process of opposing this genocidal war against the people of Palestine, because at the end of the day, you know, the pressure points of these societies that we live in as capitalist societies, the pressure points are in the places where working people are at. So if it's working people that are getting involved in these movements, it's much more powerful because they have the capacity to get at the pressure points of capital, and the push that they can give these imperialist states is much stronger. So it's so important that we're able to show our working class not only the moral dilemma at play and you know, this horrendous issue. And one of the slogans that has came out, it's a beautiful slogan, you know, it's, this isn't a Muslim issue. You don't have to be Muslim to support Palestine. It's a human issue. That definitely is an angle we have to bring to the table, but also appeal to their self-interest and show them how it is that the interests that are waging a genocidal war against the people of Palestine are the same imperialist capitalist interests that keep us indebted here at home, that keep us poor, that keep us oppressed, that push, you know, addictive drugs on us, that destroy our families, that incarcerate us at rates, you know, the world has never seen before. It is the same imperialist assholes who make our life living hell in this country that are waging this war against the Palestinian people. If the Palestinians win, we also win because our class wins. If the Palestinians lose, we lose. We have skin in the game. This is our fight too. It's not just a fight we're getting involved in out of empathy. It's our fucking fight too.
That's why I keep bringing up the point about Israelis having free healthcare. It's not to say that Israeli society is awesome and their economic conditions actually have been worsening, which is why Netanyahu is more unpopular and decided to form a coalition with the far right in this country. But either way, it's because it shows that economic issues in the U.S. are connected to imperialism. We're giving Israel enough money to where their people can have health care, and 45,000 Americans are dying every year because they don't have access to basic health care. So why are we investing $3.8 billion a year plus in Israeli weapons and propping up Israel when our own people are dying due to lack of healthcare access? And as Lenin talks about in imperialism, one of the main problems that you have once capitalism reaches its stage of imperialism is opportunism among the organized working class in the imperialist countries. Right? You have a lot of people who are part of the trade union movement who just care about that. They just care about getting better deals for themselves in the workplace. But then they side with imperialism. So when you see organized workers not siding with imperialism, when you see them calling out the U.S. empire specifically, it's great to see. And that's the importance of theory, and the importance of the theory of capitalist imperialism is because it helps us combat opportunism and or just false consciousness, combat, you know, workers falling into imperialist propaganda, because we say, no, this is not in your interest. Your tax dollars are being sent to prop up this apartheid state, your tax dollars are being sent to prop up this genocide, and the people in the genocidal country have health care, and the US government won't even give you health care. They won't even, make sure your basic needs are taken care of before they'll rip part of your paycheck out and send it to an apartheid state, send it somewhere else to further their own accumulation of capital and surplus value. So yeah.
Beautifully said, brother. I wanted to share a video just to keep exposing Israeli hypocrisy and projection. This was a quote tweeted by our comrade Rania Kalek from Breakthrough News. She has one of the best shows on the internet. I'm sure if you're watching us, you probably know about it, but if you don't, make sure to check it out. Sharing the Al-Mayadeen. I'm sorry, my pronunciations are not the best. But this is an Israeli occupational soldier using literally a Palestinian freed prisoner, Ala Abu Hash, blindfolded as a literal human shield, which is something that they've been accusing Hamas of doing, but that there's no proof of Hamas doing it. So let's give that a watch.
Wow. So everything Hamas is doing is justified then, right? Absolutely everything. If Israel's allowed to bomb hospitals and refugee camps and massacre journalists because Hamas was using them as human shields, well, we just saw an Israeli soldier using a human shield. Therefore, by Israel's logic, everything Hamas does is justified. Israel is the new ISIS.
Absolutely. And well, I mean, the people are turning. We've seen the polls. More than 65% of Americans are in favor of a ceasefire. But Joe, no ceasefire under any circumstances. Biden has affirmed that he is not giving any possibility of there being a ceasefire. So let's give that a watch.
Genocide Joe.
Genocide Joe. No possibility of a ceasefire. That's American democracy right there. Vast majority of the people are in favor of a ceasefire. Like 80-something% of the people in the party of the person that's leading the country are in favor of a ceasefire, but we don't get any ceasefire. And when we're overwhelmingly against something, if it benefits the interests of the people who fund our politicians, then even if we're against it, we end up having it shoved on our face, because it's not a democracy. It's not the people that are in power. It is a capitalist dictatorship. It is the richest in the country, those who own what we watch, what we eat, when we go to war, and who with. They're the ones that dictate what goes and what doesn't. It's not the people. It's not a democracy. We wage wars across the world, plundering in the name of something that we don't have, which are democracy and human rights.
100%. Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a dictatorship of capital. It is the government is nothing but a tool of the capitalist ruling class. It's almost like they're not even pretending anymore. Now you have people like Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks saying that they're not going to vote Biden. I mean, it's really turning a lot of Biden voters away from him. And the people who he paid to support him on TikTok, some of whom I know and have known for years now, are just desperate. Just posting, we still need to vote for Biden. You're privileged if you don't vote for Biden. And they're just getting trashed. They're just getting ratioed beyond belief. Because who's going to vote for a genocidal maniac like Joe Biden because he's the lesser of two evils, right? It's literally like saying Hitler's the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, Trump would be doing the genocide, but he'd be so much more rude about it. Don't you think that? No.
All the
Genocide is
genociders can
genocide.
piss off. They're not getting my vote. Neither's Trump.
Oh my God. These people are so ahistorical in their political practice. They think that because things are like this now and have been like this for a long time, that it's impossible for things to change. And that's ridiculous. If there's something that is constant, the only thing that is constant in this world is the fact that nothing is constant, that everything is a constant state of change. And the fact that we're ruled right now by two imperialist, bloodthirsty, fascistic parties doesn't mean that we will always be ruled by these two imperialist, fascistic parties. We can change this, but we're not going to change it if we say, okay, this one is the lesser of two evils, and therefore I'm going to continue participating in this form of bourgeois politics. We're only going to change it if we organize, realize that this can change, and build a party that genuinely represents the people. That's the only way we're going to be able to change.
These people are just so cucked by the two-party duopoly, and they don't realize it because they don't have the same concept of the ruling class that we have, right? They don't see there being a ruling class. They just see two political parties, and that's all we got, and that's all we'll ever have eternally, even though, like Carlos said, that's not been the case. We haven't always just had the Democrats and Republicans in this country. There have been different parties. There have been times when third parties have made significant gains or significant runs at the presidency. But not only that, but these people don't understand that both parties serve the same ruling class. Both parties serve the capitalist class, or more specifically, the finance capitalists. So not like small business owners, but giant mega corporations and giant banks who control the politicians through campaign donations and through lobbying. And most of our bills in this country that get passed are literally written by corporate lobbyists, right? Both parties serve that ruling class. They both serve the capitalist class, and they work together in order to serve that class. But if you don't see who the ruling class is, being the owning class, being the dominant class economically, the capitalists, the corporations, if you don't realize that they're the ones running the show, they're the ones who lied us into Iraq, they're the ones profiting off of war, they're the ones making sure that we never have any social programs or pro-worker or pro-union legislation passed, then you can get caught up in the hoopla of the Democrats versus Republicans and thinking that's all that politics ever is and that's all that politics ever can be. No, these parties are both serving the ruling class, which is why the vast majority of our country doesn't feel that the political system serves them, and why there's like 50% of people who don't vote. So you need to understand that they both serve the dominant class economically. You need to look at the economic underpinnings of political issues in political parties if you want to understand what they're truly about. And if you do that with the Democrats, if you look at their donors, if you look at the lobbyists, if you look at the people paying for Joe Biden's campaign, it is the most wealthy and powerful people in the country. It's giant bankers, it's the pharmaceutical industry, it's the insurance industry, it's the weapons industry. It's giant mega corporations and organizations like BlackRock and Vanguard.
The American people have a saying for that. Follow the money. You follow the money and you find the truth of whatever it is you're looking for. Thank you to the Institute's official sugar daddy, Ross Iron Cole. Thank you so much, comrade. I am constant and unchanging. The comrade is Parmenidean and Eleatic at heart. You know what? As a philosopher, I do appreciate that impulse for finding that the unchanging and the permanent, because that's how philosophy is founded. Philosophy it starts with the question, what is all that is? You know, what is that thing which is constant amidst the constant flow of the many? What is that one thing which is constant? And it starts with Thales saying it's water. All is water. All is water presupposes the question, what is all that is? And that is where philosophy is born. And it's not until our friend Heraclitus, who as dialectical materialists, we're all Heraclitians at heart, whether we know it or not, who says that all that is change. It's flux. It's flux, which is the real universal and contradiction and all these other things that are at the core of our dialectical outlooks. But thank you so much, Comrade Ross.
You bet. It's
I
all
have
white Christian men. They're actually not all Christian. All the people who run the world, they're just objectively not. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
yeah, the ruling class doesn't divide itself by color, or
Or
by
by religion.
religion, or by anything. It's extremely united. And there's this one saying that Dr. Wolf had, Richard Wolf, which was something along the lines of, "We're out organized. The ruling class is organized. It understands itself as a class. It's a class for itself. It knows what its interest is. It knows how to unite on the principal things that are important for it. It'll bicker all day over issues that are not of substance, and then over issues of substance, it always comes together and realizes what its interest is. And we don't have the organizations to do that just yet as a class, but we can build them, and they're already being built somewhat spontaneously. But here's our video from Noam Chomsky, someone who is a legend in many ways, someone who we've learned from a lot. But of course, as Marxists, Leninists, as communists, we have a whole lot in disagreement with Chomsky as well. But these days we find ourselves in great overlap in terms of our positions with Chomsky, who has been very critical of the genocidal war on the Palestinians, who's had a basically correct position on the proxy war against Russia and on other issues as well. So let's give this short, less than 1 minute video a watch, where Chomsky is asked what he thinks about the statement that Israel should not exist and whether he is horrified by that statement. Let's see what he has to say.
The statement is that, in the course of time, Israel should no longer exist. Well, actually, I happen to agree with that too. In fact, so do a lot of people in Israel, the ones who think there should be a single democratic state. That's not calling for wiping anyone out. Actually, there are two countries that are not only calling for some nation not to exist, but are destroying it, namely the US and Israel. That's their position with regard to the Palestinians. And they're not just saying it. I stress, they're not just saying it, they're doing it day by day. That's the meaning of the policies that are going on right before our eyes in Gaza and the West Bank, which we are supporting and paying for. The statement.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Absolutely.
Any comments on that Chomsky clip, Eddie?
Yeah, it's so true. It's like Dan Cohen said in his debate with Destiny, and as John Mearsheimer said, and I've said, and a lot of people have said, that Israel is dependent on enforcing an apartheid because if they had democracy, if they gave Arab Palestinians political rights, the state of Israel would cease to exist. If Arabs and Jewish people in the region had the same rights under the law, there would be no state of Israel because the Palestinian Arabs who make up the majority wouldn't vote for it. So the existence of Israel is dependent on having an apartheid state and dependent on them being an ethno state. So, advocating for a one-state solution is just advocating for democracy. And if you're against that, you're against democracy. And, people say, oh, you don't think the state of Israel should exist. That's genocidal or whatever. No, that's democracy. If we had democracy, the state of Israel wouldn't exist. All right. And in order to make the state of Israel exist, you need a fascistic ethno state that systematically deprives Arab Palestinians of basic human rights. So it's not a radical thing to say that Israel shouldn't exist. It means you support democracy, which is what America claims to support. And, ironically enough, they say the reason they prop up Israel is because they're the only democracy in the Middle East, which is just beyond parody.
Muslims, Christians, and Jews were living happily together before the settlements, the Zionist settlements, and then definitely before the Nakba, the catastrophe. So yeah, it's absurd. And Richard Medhurst and Scott Ritter kind of got into a scuffle in the interview that Medhurst did with Ritter, I think today or yesterday. because Ritter still wants to hold on to the idea of an Israeli state, and it separates the actions that we're seeing unfold now from the ones that were undertaken back when he traveled to Israel and supported Israel. And I side with Medhertz there. The fundamental core of this Israeli project is an ethno state that is bound to produce the sort of genocidal politics that we're seeing unfold before our very eyes. And its structural purpose in terms of geopolitics is to be a colonial outpost of the U.S. and to defend U.S. interests in the region. So there's no purpose for its existence other than to support imperialism. You can have a democratic state that is not just ethnically Jewish, that's mixed and that defends the rights of Jews, of Muslims, of everyone, irrespective of their religion, race, or any sort of accidental quality. That's not the fact that they're human beings.
Absolutely. I don't have anything else to add. That's perfect.
Mauricio coming in with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much. My guys, keep it up. I'm going to switch and increase my membership on Patreon so you guys get a larger cut. We will never waver, never surrender, and continue to wage the struggle till victory. Hasta la victoria siempre.
Badass. Let's go.
Let me. I have the actual flag. It says. Pull it up here. Jesus Christ, unfolding a flag is harder than I thought it was.
You got this. Oh.
Hasta la victoria siempre.
El Che.
Always, baby. There we go.
I love how I have my face up by my Che clock, as if I'm on the same level.
Yeah, it's like our international.
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative of the comrade who did it for us, but I watch it. It's like this is someone who doesn't know us would think that we're trying to place ourselves on the level of these great figures that are on the show, but that's not what we're trying to do. We didn't make the video; someone made it for us, and we're very appreciative of it. But we're also working on a new one with the international still, but that doesn't make it seem as if we're trying to place ourselves on par with Lenin and shit.
We'll have it out eventually. For now, it's good. Thank you so much, Mauricio. You're the man. Hope everything's going good, buddy. And as far as political activism and basketball or whatever else you're pursuing right now.
Absolutely. We have one segment that is connected to the subject of Palestine, but it's also connected to the subject of RFK, who was someone who we were kind of hopeful of at the beginning. It seemed like one of the more rational people coming out and presenting himself as an anti-deep state, anti-establishment candidate, anti-war. For a period of time, he was telling the truth about the proxy war against Russia. But like all these other bourgeois politicians, in time, you give them time and they'll show you their contradictions and their weaknesses. Carlos is more Fidel. Yes, absolutely. I'm more Fidel.
Someone was saying they're more of a Castro guy than El Che. Like,
yeah,
we kind of are the same, but
Fidel is, I'm biased, but for me, Fidel is up there with Lenin and Stalin as the best leaders of the 20th, and Deng and Mao. But I'd throw Fidel on the Marxism-Leninism heads list. But let's look at this this post by Anya Parampil from the Gray Zone. She says in his memoirs, longtime Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko writes about his final meeting with JFK 2 months before the president's assassination. JFK named two groups as stifling peace efforts between Washington and Moscow, ideological anti-communists and Zionists. Little would you know that the person running today as president, his nephew, who utilizes so much of the political capital that his family has, and is today one of the most ardent Zionists in the political circus that's American elections, and also if you consider some of his comments on China, as anti-communist as anyone else in the race. So, what do you think, Eddie?
Yeah, it's kind of unbelievable because I always said, RFK is probably so pro-Israel because of his legacy of, being a liberal and his family's legacy of supporting Israel. But then you see that even JFK, understood that the Zionists were a threat to peace and that they were, really an ethno-nationalist group and a fascistic group. And it's like, where is this even coming from with RFK? I saw our buddy John Jenkins put out on X on Twitter the other day that maybe the Israeli government has a video of RFK taking the vaccine. And so they're using that to blackmail him and saying that we're going to release this video of you taking the vaccine unless you support Israel. I mean, that might be the best theory at this point because he is just an ardent Zionist, ignoring all these intelligent people like Glenn Greenwald and Max Blumenthal and others who have spent a lot of time in Israel, Palestine, who have studied this forever, who have done great journalism on Israel, Palestine. He's ignoring them to continue cheering on a genocide and continue smearing anybody who supports Palestine as a terrorist. I had a tweet that got over 1,000 likes the other day in response to RFK, saying that he's tanking his campaign. He pitched this as an anti-establishment campaign, and now he's, beating the war drums along with the establishment and along with Israel in a really disgusting fashion. It makes me think like, yeah, someone in the Israeli government has a video of that dude taking the vaccine and they're going to hold that over his head forever. I mean, really, what cowardice by him though. And it's going to tank his pseudo anti-establishment campaign. So what a wasted opportunity there from RFK. Because he was cucked by the state of Israel because he didn't have theory. You need theory. I'm sorry. You need to be a Marxist-Leninist. You need there's a reason, like, I know people have their disagreements with Jackson Hinkle, but he keeps ending up on the right side of history when it comes to these giant geopolitical debates. And I don't know if he's the most well-read in theory, but I know he has people advising him and people behind him who have read Marxist theory. So they can recognize, like, say, the state of Israel is an imperialist outpost for the U.S. It's an outpost for the capitalist ruling class. You need theory to understand the world. You need Marxism to understand the world in the modern day. I don't know what else to say. It is what it is.
Well, he's also, in terms of class position, from the few old money that we have a lot of new money in the U.S., but he's old money. He's part of the almost pseudo-aristocratic family. So in terms of class interests, he realizes that there's various areas where the establishment is getting to a point where it threatens the interests of the parts of the American capitalist class because of how bold they're getting in their imperialism while affairs at home aren't straight. It doesn't take a scientist to see how it is that, as Parenti would say, the empire is feeding off of the republic. And, for the capitalists that are old money, that have been here for a long time, that's not very beneficial because they want to continue the order where they're on top, getting these humongous profits, living like kings. But so, there's some areas where the assessment is different. And, we reacted Wednesday to a clip of RFK saying the quiet part out loud, having a Trump moment where he says, yeah, we got to support Israel because it is the only way that we can defend American imperialist interests in the Middle East. So, yeah, it's a lack of theory, but his heart is not in the right place either. I don't think.
True.
He's still an elite.
True. Yeah. Very interesting find though from Anya there. I mean, there's a lot of people, like I said, who learned about the crimes of Israel like around the late 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. People who had been hardcore Zionists were like, "Yo, what the hell?" They found out about all the massacres and about some of the things because at first the Zionists were trying to keep private that what they wanted to do. Meaning expel the Palestinians. And there were a lot more moderate Zionists who weren't, who would argue that the Palestinians will just get up and leave or they'll share the land with us. And then in order to argue against those Zionists and in order to argue for a violent establishment of the state of Israel, these extremist Zionists would say, no, we need compulsory expelling of the Palestinians. We need to do it by force. They were arguing for using force to expel the Palestinians and then arguing that, we can't live here together. We need to push them off the land in order for us to seize it and establish an ethno-state. And, as more of these documents and more of these statements from people like David Ben-Gurion were released, more and more people turned against Zionism and saw it as a threat to peace. But do you have anything else to say about that, Carlos? I wanted to hit on one of these comments here quick, which is a bit of a segue into a different topic before we leave.
Yeah, I just wanted to, we've been talking a whole lot about the crimes of Israel, but I wanted to show a couple spotlights of fights against the genocide being waged. And this is at the BlackRock headquarters. This is presidential candidate Claudia de la Cruz for the PSL, shutting down the BlackRock headquarters.
And disrupt every fucking morning of the day if we have to until Palestine is free.
Badass. Talk about going to the belly of the beast, huh?
Asking the death of Palestinian babies. How dare they? How dare they go back home and with the same hands that they invest on weapons, killing hundreds of thousands of babies, because we have to take into account this shit started before October 7th. How dare they go back home and with those same hands?
There you go. That's a candidate with balls. We love to see it. There's also a clip. There was protest yesterday, the 9th, and Midtown Manhattan was shut down. Our friend Manolo de los Santos says we did it again, and we'll do it many times over till Palestine is free. Close to 20,000 protesters calling for a ceasefire and an end to Israeli occupation. Shut down traffic in Midtown Manhattan on Thursday night, marking one of the largest actions in New York City in recent weeks. This is beautiful to see, man. Lenin is very clear that social revolution takes a variety of factors. Amongst the objective factors for revolution is the willingness of the people to take it to the streets, to protest, and to act. Not just to disagree and to be able to comment to their friends and families, man, I fucking can't keep living like this, but to be willing to do something. It's very clear that we've gotten to that point where the American people are willing to hit the streets. Now it's just a matter of organizing that energy and understanding how to channel it in important moments and towards revolutionary ends.
Hell yeah. And that's perfect place to go protest, go to BlackRock, the people who are profiting off of endless war and who are really the part of the imperialist ruling class, bunch of shareholders there. So, I want to answer this comment though. My economics, or my undergrad in economics is from a good school. There wasn't a single class on Marx. Yeah, I was telling my friend about this the other day. I was trying to explain how neoclassical economics is basically a dogma, basically a religious faith, and I don't consider it a science in any way. And I was trying to explain to my buddy who's not an economist. He got his degree in social work, but I was trying to explain to him that, which is something I've written about in my article, Neoclassical Economics and Postmodern Philosophy, two expressions of the ruling class. I'm like, if economics was actually a science, how could you ignore completely the school of Marxism the way that they do in the West? Like, why would you not learn classical economics, neoclassical economics, and Marxist economics? You know, the three biggest schools of economics. They completely rip Marxist economics out of it. They rip out the Marxist critiques of classical economics, which anyone who, you know, has read classical economists like Adam Smith and David Ricardo have to admit that Marx adds on to their work or makes some valuable critiques of their work. But instead, they just completely ignore it and teach you neoclassical economics, because if you knew Marxist economics, you would know that neoclassical economics is bullshit. You would, look at neoclassical economics and be like, this is a dogma. This is a religious faith that tells me to always believe in capitalism and the free market, preached by people like Milton Friedman, who are having their pockets filled by the Koch brothers and the richest people in the country. I mean, it's really nothing but an academic expression of the capitalist ruling class and of capitalism, versus Marxism is the use of the scientific method and of historical materialism to rigorously study and analyze the economic system and how the economic system relates to the political system and every other sphere of society. It's a much more scientific way to go about looking at economics than neoclassical economics, which is a dogmatic, unscientific way to go about things. But in academia, in a lot of economics courses, and thankfully there are a lot of schools still who will, teach at least a few classes on Marxism, but the vast majority of them are teaching neoclassical bullshit and completely ignoring Marxism or just dismissing it, as Marx's predictions and his critiques were proved wrong. We don't even have to read them. They were proved wrong. It's completely absurd. And I've heard people propose teaching economics like, we're going to teach Keynesian economics. We're going to teach neoclassical economics. We're going to teach classical economics. And then we'll teach Marxist economics, and we'll let the kids choose. We'll let them draw, what's best from each. That makes a lot more sense. But what they have to do, of course, is rip Marxism out of it, because that would give kids a real critique of the system and imbue them with real radical politics, which the Koch brothers have spent billions and billions of dollars trying to stop. The Koch brothers and all these other organizations and capitalists connected to what's called the Kochtopus, which Jane Meyer lays out in her excellent book, Dark Money, that goes into universities and pushes universities to support neoclassical economics and get them to rip Marxism out of the textbooks, rip Marxism out of the curriculum. So it's a reflection of the capitalist system that we have so much neoclassical economic theory in academia as opposed to Marxist economic theory. But I'm not surprised you went to a good school and there wasn't a single class on Marx. And I just wanted to dive into how absurd it is to teach an economics course and not talk about Marx at all.
Well, it's absurd to teach any course in the humanities and not touch on Marx, because Marx he should be in sociology, he should be in philosophy, he should be in political science. Which, I'm sorry, Eddie, but there shouldn't be political science or economics. There should be political economy.
I agree.
So he's all over all of these fields because he's literally, I'm sorry to break it to you, but the most important thinker, at the very least, of the 19th century, if not of the last 3 centuries, and the most relevant, and it's when they do teach Marxism in philosophy departments, at least, it's always this form of Western Marxism that, in terms of the substantive stuff, it agrees with imperialism. It operates through the paradigm of the purity fetish and not dialectical materialism, which is what Marxism is. And that's the safe, domesticated Marxism. It's a Marxism that says, look, every socialist experiment in the history of humanity has been an utter failure, but we're the ones that are going to get it right. And if it doesn't do that, it does similar operations that end up always having capitalism be the lesser of all possible alternatives. It's a form of Thatcherite Marxism where it accepts that there is no alternative. It accepts Tina, and that's the one that's safe for the academy In philosophy and in economics, I've heard it's the same thing. If you read Radhika Desai's work and the work of Alan Freeman and other Marxist economists that accept the reality that there's this contradiction at the core of commodity production, that commodity production is contradictory production, and that it leads ultimately to crisis. So the people that actually accept the body of work that's developed in economics, political economy by Marx in Capital Volume 1, 2, and 3, and in Theories of Surplus Value, if you look at their work, they're also making a similar critique within the field of economics. Which Marxist economy is the one that's accepted? Well, it's the people who consider that the tendency of the rate of profit to fall is not true, the people that reinterpret the analysis of commodity production, and who, in essence, as with philosophy, suck out the living revolutionary spirit of Marxism, which is what allows it to understand the world and to be the best and sharpest weapon, as Engels would say, for the proletariat in their struggle for a new social order.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
We have one segment that I don't know if we want to get to. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read the article, but I've been a huge fan of this website, The Cradle. They have a series of really good commentators on geopolitics. And there was a recent piece by Pepe Escobar on basically assessing how Russia has been interpreting this escalation of the Israeli war against the Palestinian people, because they started out with comments on positing themselves as supposedly neutral. But what Pepe does in this article is show through 3 different examples how it is that Russia is standing with Palestine, criticizing Israel, connecting Israel's existence and actions to the general imperialist system, Western-dominated imperialist system that Russia feels like it is itself fighting against, and how in doing so, Russia is siding with the global majority, with the global South, with the countries of the world that have been exploited and looted by colonialism and neocolonialism and imperialism in general over the last 400 or 500 years. So here's a few quotes. This is from Putin at a recent event where he said, "There is no justification for the terrible events taking place in Gaza now, where hundreds of thousands of innocent people are being killed indiscriminately without having anywhere to flee or to hide from the bombing. When you see blood-stained children, dead children, the suffering of women and old people, when you see the medics killed, of course, it makes you clench your fist as tears well in your eyes." And he said also that we must clearly understand who in reality is behind the tragedy of peoples in the Middle East and in other regions around the world, and who has been organizing this lethal chaos and who benefits from it. So it's very clear who he's talking about there. It's the current ruling elites in the United States and its satellites who are the main beneficiaries of the global instability that they use to extract their bloody rent. Their strategy is also clear. The United States as a global superpower is becoming weaker and is losing its position, and everyone sees and understands this, even judging by the trends in the world economy. So this was Exhibit A of how Russia is standing with Palestine through some of the comments from Putin. But Eddie, I'll give you a chance to comment on those before we get to the other 2 examples.
That's just so interesting to see Russia continue to act in an anti-imperialist fashion. And you got to imagine part of it's because of their current conditions where Putin is trying to rebuild the economy after it was devastated and subjected to neoliberal shock therapy in the 90s with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I also think it stems from their socialist history and their tradition of combating Western imperialism and Western hegemony and domination. And it only makes sense that now that Russia's reasserting themselves on the global stage as an economy, that their politics would follow and that they would, support not only their own interests, but the interests of other countries who are fighting against this system of Western neoliberal hegemony and dominance.
Yeah, absolutely. Pepe, who, by the way, if you don't follow Pepe's work, make sure to.
No, please.
Make sure to do so.
It's so good.
It's tremendous. He also does shows every once in a while in the show that Michael Hudson and Radica Decide do together. He's a frequent guest on their monthly show, and every time the three get together, it's sparks fly. You're getting top of the line analysis there. But a couple days after the comments that we read from Putin, Vasily Nebenzia, who's the permanent representative at the UN for Russia, said that Israel, as an occupying power, does not have the right for self-defense, a fact that is supported by a UN International Court consultative ruling way back in 2004. At the time, that ruling voted 14 out of 15 in favor of making that argument that Israel does not have that right to self-defense because it's an occupying power. Nebenzia, in legal terms, nullified the endlessly evoked right to self-defense argument brandished by Tel Aviv and the whole NATO galaxy. The hegemon, Tel Aviv's protector, recently vetoed Brazil's draft for a humanitarian UN Security Council just because it did not mention Israel's right to genocide. So it's a very clear instance of Russia siding with Palestine and being critical of the Israeli genocide war against the Palestinian people. And the last example is from Sergei Lavrov, who said in a recent press conference that reiterated that Moscow's priorities already stressed by Putin and Nebenzia for an urgent ceasefire, humanitarian corridors, and a return to the table to negotiate an independent Palestinian state as envisioned by the UN Security Council within the 1967 borders, which would coexist in peace and security with Israel. So various examples of Russia that has been acting in an objectively anti-imperialist manner for well over a decade now, siding once again with Palestine and aligning itself with the interest of the global majority, of the vast majority of humanity, who's excluded when the US and the West and NATO talk about the international community, a community that only includes the 14% of the world that colonized the rest of the planet, so that a very small group of that 14% of the world could be ridiculously rich.
For sure. And I think keep stuff like this in mind when you hear Russia demonized by the news, who tries to paint them as, just these evil comic book villains. And we're not saying Russia's perfect. We're not saying there's no class struggle in Russia or there's no capitalist class that's still around in Russia. But, the boogeyman, the demonized version of Russia that we get from the Western news media is so ridiculous when you look at what Russia's doing, and standing up for the Palestinian people who are being genocided, while meanwhile the U.S. is funding that genocide and calling anybody who calls for peace disgraceful and repugnant. It's like, who's really the comic book villain level of evil here?
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Thank you so much, Comrade Andrew, for another $5 super chat. This is the People's Institute, so all these super chats are tremendously appreciated. And we don't have Soros money, or there's no benevolent socialist billionaire funding us. So all these donations mean the world to us. There are now videos circulating around Russian Telegram, Chechens tongue-in-cheek proposing supplying Kingzals to Palestine. That would be very interesting. What are your thoughts on that, Eddie?
That would be interesting. I imagine it's just a joke to roast the U.S. for all the weapons that they've sent to Ukraine. Because, imagine how the U.S. State Department and the U.S. media and NATO would react if Chechens started supplying guns to Palestine. They'd be saying, terrorists, terrorists, even though in 2014, the U.S. was dumping arms and money into jihadi extremist groups in Syria. In 2011, they were doing that and shipping, literally transporting jihadi extremist groups out of Chad and into Libya to destabilize those countries and arming them to the teeth. And even though the U.S. gives Israel $3.8 billion a year in weapons, if the Chechens were to do something like send weapons to the Palestinians who are actually in line with international law and are fighting for, their own land, which was stolen from them, the U.S. would act like it's the worst thing that's ever happened, and the Chechens are terrorists and the Palestinians are terrorists and the terrorists are working together. We need to do more. Give more money to Israel. Speaking of which, did you see my here, I'm just gonna pull it up before we end this stream.
If you can't give us financial support, okay, please give us a credit and we will give you back money.
Attention, funniers. Israel is in trouble. Needs your help to fight off the Palestinians. All it needs is your parents' credit card number, the expiration date, and the 3 digits on the back.
And then I made a funny, but then at the end, I threw in that Atlantic Council article, which they're basically a mouthpiece for the military-industrial complex. And they said, Zelensky wants Ukraine to be a big Israel. Here's a roadmap, which shows you that Ukraine and Israel are the same thing, neo-colonial outposts of the West, or at least the West had intentions of making Ukraine a neo-colonial outpost before the Russian SMO. And they wanted to turn it into just a U.S. vassal state run by fascistic extremists, which is exactly what Israel is.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I have another example of that sort of thing, but I don't know if I should play it. I just asked you.
Wait, how does this relate?
It's the same energy as
this is Zelensky. Let's just play it. This is Zelensky right now.
Man, you got any spare change?
Sorry, bro, I'm all out, man.
Man, I got these cheeseburgers, man.
I don't want any cheeseburgers.
Please, man. I suck your dick.
Yeah. Get out of here, man. Get out of here.
Do you think this was Mayor Pete on his visit to Ukraine? Get out of here. Zelensky's like, please, man. Oh, man.
Oh, that was hilarious. I just noticed that was Dave Chappelle. I've seen that movie maybe 1,000,000 times. I didn't notice it was Dave Chappelle. I have one more non-Palestine related, kind of non-Palestine related thing that I wanted to ask you about. I'm sure it's something that we would be covering.
That wasn't even Dave Chappelle, bro.
It wasn't Dave Chappelle? It looked like Dave Chappelle.
It really did.
But Jill Stein has just announced her bid for presidency with the Green Party, of course, which means that now on the socialist left, you have 3 people running outside of the duopoly. Claudia de la Cruz running with the PSL, Jill Stein running with the Green Party, and Dr. Cornel West running as an independent. So I wanted to play this short video of her speaking. I think this is the one. I might have the wrong video here. Yeah, I do have the wrong video. So I don't know. Tell me what you think about the campaign launch, Eddie, while I look for her video announcing the campaign launch.
Sorry, I'm responding to a comment here. Harold Dogbottom said, I would feel sorry for Zelensky if he got blackmailed. I had that thought the other day. Like, what if Zelensky didn't mean to get in this situation and NATO just like threatened his family or something and forced him to do this? That'd be terrible. It's honestly could have happened, but yeah, I don't know. This field is so crowded and the left is so disorganized right now. It's like my thought at first was like, I hope, you know, all these people do their campaign and they all run and they all voice left-wing or, you know, socialistic ideas and anti-imperialist ideas. And then at the end, you know, whoever's polling the best, the other people drop out and endorse them, sort of like the Democrats did for each other or did for Joe Biden when it looked like he was going to lose to Bernie. But like, there's no way that happens. You know, that's an idealistic way to think. I doubt they're going to do that. And I don't know. The campaigns have been so unorganized at this point. I'm just hoping that, like, whatever, everybody run and get anti-imperialist and socialist ideas out there. Like, it's not a campaign for a victory at this point. Maybe I'm being overly cynical, but that's just the reality. It's a campaign to get our ideas out there. So hopefully Jill Stein runs on a platform that we agree with, and hopefully she gets the ideas out there, but I don't hope for much more to come from the campaign than that.
Yeah. It's I think there does have to be a push to try to break the two-party duopoly with some form of people's party. And I don't know if running three different types of socialist candidates outside of the two-party duopoly is the best idea. I'm sorry to say this, but these sorts of divisions have always been what the ruling class loves. Like they want people who agree on 90% of things to be divided and to run separately and to take up their own projects, when in reality, if we were smart, we'd say, hey, if you think that the Democrats and the Republicans both suck and represent the capitalist class, let's run a unity campaign, a coalition campaign, like other people in Latin America have done. A lot of the socialist governments in power have been a result of these coalitions of different forces, some of which are probably very ardently fighting against each other on Twitter, disagreeing on some stuff, but that realize that it's better if a unity candidate wins than if a bourgeois candidate wins. So I don't know. I am of the thought that all of these campaigns should perhaps consider an effort at some point of uniting in one common campaign that can represent the embryonic socialist left that we do have, that's growing, but that is extremely divided, extremely sectarian, and guided by the purity fetish, which is ideologically the root of all of these divisions.
Yep, couldn't have said it better myself. Unity, unity, unity. Class unity, that is.
Yes, class unity. But yeah, that was another event from this past week in politics. I ran out of the very long list of topics that we had proposed to talk about. I didn't think we were going to do it, but we did it.
Congrats to everybody.
Yes. There was some comments earlier about the Hinkle interview with Alex Jones. It might be best for you to give that a watch at some point and us to comment on it after you've seen it. Yeah. I was able to see it yesterday, but
Hinkle just got banned from Instagram too.
He got reinstated.
Oh, okay. That's good. It's good. All right.
It's an interesting phenomenon. He's the most viewed person on social media, at least on Twitter he is. And he's someone that, regardless of some of the things he says, he has stood with the coups in Africa against the neocolonial governments. He stood now with the Palestinian people. He stood with the Russian people in their fight against fascism. And he stands with China. And, he says that he upholds Stalin and the legacy of communism. So those are all positive things to be reaching the millions, tens of millions of people that he does on a daily basis. So I would just urge the people that are made uncomfortable by some of his other comments to, see the complexities and the contradictions at play here and see the positive. And I think that the scale that he's doing this at is definitely a positive for people who would like to get communist ideas out there and regular working people to support projects fighting against American imperialism.
Yep. Yeah, I think we've said that quite a few times now, but of course there will always be people just say, "Oh, you're not Pat Sock, MAGA communist," blah 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 blah. But yeah, we made our point about Jackson pretty clear. So, All right. Well, patreon.com/MidwesternMarks, folks. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'm falling asleep at the wheel here, so I'm going to play us out with the international. But thank you all so much for your support. Anything else that I'm forgetting to plug, Carlos?
No. This weekend could be a historic one for the Institute. Eddie's going to have the possibility to defend communism to millions of people. So I'm very excited for him. I think if our positions could have the ideal representative, it would be him. They're going to be defended as best as anyone could. So I'm excited to see what comes out of it, and pumped to be able to tell the people of the Midwestern Marxist Institute, the people that share our content and like it and donate and do all of these things that keep the Institute alive. I can't wait for you all to find out what it is, and hopefully when it comes out, we can do some events around it.
Yeah, it'll be worth the money, folks. I promise that you've donated, and I really, really appreciate y'all for doing so. So, all right. Well, we'll see you on the next one, everybody. Solidarity.
And economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.